Today I have with me Jess Torrez, a former highway D.P.S. officer, a former Scottsdale police officer. I've asked him to come here and talk with respect to our topic, how can women protect themselves from a bad police officer encounter? Recently in the news, there's been a lot of reports of some really bad police officers who have stopped women, taking them to some remote location, and then sexually assaulting them. I wanted to ask Jess today about his views about bad police officers and what could women do that's pragmatic if they find themselves in a situation where they feel uncomfortable or they think that the police officer is acting inappropriate. In short, how can a woman protect herself from sexual abuse or from a situation where she feels uncomfortable? Jess, before we begin, can you just tell our viewers a little bit about yourself again?
Well, I have 10 years law enforcement experience here in the state of Arizona. I now run a private investigation and security guard business here, and I do expert witness testimony for police policy and procedures here in state and federal court.
You testified as an expert in court, is that correct?
That's correct, both in civil and criminal cases.
Right. And I think you were also a SWAT officer?
I was on the SWAT team. I worked undercover narcotics. I did uniform time. I was also in the training division with the Department of Public Safety.
All right. Jess, let me first begin with what your attitude is as far as citizens tape recording police encounters. What do you think about that?
I think it's smart. I think it's prudent. In this day and age, we have the ability to do that with your phones, whether you videotape them or just audio record them. That way nobody can say either this was said or this wasn't said. Nobody can deny what has occurred.
All right. Recently, I think within this past week, the top law enforcement official in the state of Arizona, Colonel Frank Milstead, was recently stopped for going over 90 miles per hour, zigzagging through traffic. In Arizona, that's actually a criminal offense. Have you heard about that case?
Yes, I have. If he was doing 25 miles above the posted speed limit, then yes, it was a criminal offense.
And what do you think about the top law enforcement official? I mean, this is the department that you worked with for so many years. What do you think of Colonel Frank Milstead of breaking the law in that matter?
Well, certainly that doesn't bode well for the Department of Public Safety or his position. It's unsafe, and it's just, you don't expect that out of somebody who's supposed to set an example for close to 1,500 to 1,800 sworn officers.
Now, I represent clients all the time who get stopped for criminal speeding. I've yet to be able to get them a break on the ticket, yet Colonel Milstead was not cited by the Yavapai police officer that stopped him. Why do you think that was the case? Did he get special treatment?
Well, in the police realm, they call it professional courtesy. So that's why he called the deputy back to show him his credentials and made sure that he knew he was a police officer, and his fiancée at that time made sure that the deputy knew that he was the director of the Department of Public Safety when she said he runs the whole thing. All
right. So in that instance, the fact that this was caught on the officer's body camera is the only reason we, the public, know about Frank Milstead breaking the law.
That's true, because there would be no record of that, and certainly no video of that, how he called the officer back after the officer was headed back to his car, not only to run him, but also write the citation or print out the citation. Because once it's printed out, it would be very hard for that officer to avoid it.
You agree with me that Colonel Frank Milstead got a major break that the normal average citizen would not get?
Oh, with that citation, the speed, the in and out of traffic, the way traffic conditions are, very few people would have walked away from that.
All right.
If any.
Now, let's get back to police officers who are committing sexual assaults. We've had quite a few in Arizona lately. It's surprising to me that we're even talking about this topic. When I was a prosecutor back in the late 80s, this was unheard of. You always thought of police officers protecting women, not violating women. Do you know if there's been a change in policing? Can you give our viewers any insight as to why you think there seems to be so many police officers all over the country taking advantage of our women?
Well, I think I've thought a lot about this, and I think that the hiring standards have lowered. I don't think there's accountability like there used to be. And so you have a sergeant determining when somebody calls in and says, this occurred. The sergeant makes an initial determination whether he wants to take the complaint. So you may not get past the first line supervisor. And that's happened many times here in Arizona. We had an officer in Scottsdale who had several complaints against inappropriate touching. Finally, he assaulted a young woman at her home. The mother was upset, and instead of going to the police department, she sent a fax to all the news media. And then come to find out this guy has several complaints against him. The city settled with that young woman, but the officer was never prosecuted. Scottsdale failed to prosecute him.
Well, one officer that's not getting away so easily is former officer Tremaine Jackson, who was a D.P.S. officer, worked on the same force that you did, was recently arrested and charged with 61 counts of sexual abuse, sexual extortion, kidnapping, harassment, and I think a couple of other charges in there. Are you aware of this particular case with former Trooper Tremaine Jackson?
I heard about it on the news media, and it's just a sad commentary of somebody in uniform taking advantage of women or anybody in a situation because they have the ability to.
Okay. He's accused at this point of having assaulted 8 women. We don't know if this is all of the women, but to date, 8 women. So let me give you a scenario. It's late at night, maybe it's 1 in the morning, it's dark, you're on the highway, traffic is light or non-existent, and all of a sudden you see the lights flashing behind you. It's a highway patrol officer. The area is not very populated. You're a young female, or you're just a woman alone in the car. You're not feeling comfortable pulling over. What do you think a woman should do if she feels uncomfortable about this circumstance? What kind of action could she take that you recommend to make it highly unlikely that an officer could take advantage of the situation?
Well, she has a couple of options, but certainly if you turn your emergency blinkers on, slow down to the lawful speed or lower, and then exit the interstate or freeway to the next exit, and then turn to whichever direction there is where you have a lit intersection, either with a gas station, McDonald's, something like that, where there are people around. You pull into the parking lot, park. You also can call 911, advise the dispatcher and 911 that you're doing this, and it's for your own safety. The law allows you to do that. He's not going to be happy with it. You're not going to get a warning if you do it, but for your own safety, there's nothing wrong with that.
If I understand you, the first piece of advice that you have is for the female not to panic and not to feel that she has to stop immediately on the side of this dark road, that she can choose to find a location that she feels more comfortable, that's well lit, where there's people around. Is that correct?
Yes, because she doesn't have the intention of evading the police officer or an emergency vehicle. She merely wants to get to a safe location. It's just as if you stop on the highway and it's rush hour traffic and the officer tells you over his loudspeaker, pull over to the next exit, we'll get you out of here for safety for all. You're only wanting your own personal safety at that point.
And the officer knows that the woman is not trying to evade him, because she's substantially slowed down, put on her blinkers or emergency lights. That way the officer knows that she's aware he's behind her.
Yes, and also he knows that she's not intoxicated at that point, or she's not following lawful directions by yielding to an emergency vehicle, because again, she slowed down, she turned on her flashers, she's exiting at the next exit if it has a gas station or a well-lit intersection.
And then the next thing you suggested is that she called 911.
She certainly has the ability to call 911, saying that there's an emergency vehicle trying to pull her over. She doesn't feel comfortable or safe. It's dark, it's alone, and she's going to pull over at the next intersection.
All right. What about the suggestion that the woman not hang up during the encounter with a police officer until at least the officer comes to her window and she can identify the 911 dispatcher, the trooper's name and badge, so that at that point the trooper knows that she's called 911 and they're not alone, and that there's a record that he has just stopped her.
That's not a bad idea. There's been several cases to where not only police officers, but we have these people who are impersonating police officers that now can buy red and blue lights over the internet, mount them on their car. They buy fake uniforms and then get out and try and make these stops in what's considered to be a plain wrapped car, and there's no official markings on it. So in Arizona, we have those, and every agency uses those on the interstate or on roadways. So it's very difficult to know whether it truly is a police officer or not. And in those situations, again, your personal safety, you can pull off and say, "Officer, I was just worried you were, I didn't want to pull over in a dark, desolate area." And here in Arizona, of course, we have those areas, even in the metropolitan area on US 60, on the 202 or 101, and now with the new freeway opening up to where you won't have any traffic. It goes by for an inordinate amount of time, and it could be 7-8 lanes away. They would never know what that officer's doing.
I think you also had suggested that the female, and I think this goes for male and female people who are stopped, they feel uncomfortable, and that is to record the encounter.
There's nothing wrong or unlawful about recording an encounter on your phone. It's done all the time, and it's just, again, there's nothing wrong with that.
Actually, I would suggest as an attorney that if you're stopped by a police officer for any encounter, if that's a speeding ticket or anything, if you have your cell phone, to begin recording, because now you have evidence as to what occurred versus having to take the word of what the officer claims in a police report. What do you think about that?
I have no problem with that whatsoever. And again, the video doesn't lie. They may try and interpret it in a different way, but if the officer starts to be unprofessional, then you have it on record that he was unprofessional.
Jess, it's always good to talk to you. I thank you. In the last video, there were a lot of comments about how helpful your advice was. Do you have any last words for our listening audience?
Good police officers want good police work out there. And we all know that, good people make good police officers, not vice versa. So if you have a phone, if you have the ability to record a situation like that, any law enforcement situation, there's nothing wrong with that. And the officer should not get upset with it.
Thank you.